Hello and welcome back to the course on blockchain. And today we're going to talk about the difference between a public key and a Bitcoin address. And the reason for this tutorial is because a lot of the time people use these terms interchangeably. And in fact, I used to as well. But when I dug a little bit deeper, I found that these are actually slightly different things. And I think it's a good thing to know how they're different and why there's a reason, what the reason is for them to be different. All right, so let's have a look. So here's our diagrams up to now. We've got our private key, which generates the public key. The private key is used to create the message, and then together with the message, they create the signature. And then the public key, message, and signature all go into the verification function to get a yes/no answer. And so what is a Bitcoin address? Well, let's restructure this diagram or move this diagram a little bit to the left. So it's the same diagram, I just moved it to the left so that we have some space on the right. And what a Bitcoin address is, it is derived from the public key, and it's derived by just simply applying the SHA-256 hash function. As we know, the hash function is deterministic. There's a very low chance of any kind of collisions, so it's pretty much like if you have the public key, you will definitely always get the same address from the public key. But because the collisions are so rare and so unlikely, it's very unlikely that you will get two different public keys will generate the same address. Very, very, very unlikely. And so therefore we again, as many times in this course, we are leveraging the SHA-256 hash function here. And so what is the address for? Well, the address is where you can ask people to send you money. As just with the public key, it's something that you don't have to keep private. So the private key, you definitely don't want to ever share with anybody. That's something that is completely yours. As soon as somebody knows your private key, they can take away everything, all the money that you have, all the Bitcoins that you have. And so that has to be kept safe. Whereas public key is not the same thing. It doesn't have to be kept safe. And the address, it doesn't have to be kept safe as well. In fact, that's what you need to tell people for them to send you money, Bitcoin. The interesting thing is that people can also send you Bitcoin straight to your public key as well. So you can give them either. You can give them the public key or the address. The wallets will handle it either way. They can send you money one way or the other. But why? What's the point of the address? The reason is we want to actually try and keep the public key also safe, or not exactly private and protected all the time. We want to keep the public key. We don't want to expose it too often. We definitely will have to expose the public key when we send money to someone, when we send Bitcoin to someone else, because without the public key, they cannot run the verification function. They cannot confirm that the transaction is valid. So you will have to expose the public key when you send money. But if we can avoid exposing it when we receive money, we should do that. And that's why we use the address. And so the question is, why should we avoid exposing the public key when we can? Well, the reason for that is over here. It's in this link between the private key and the public key. So as we know, as we've discussed, there's no way to identify what the private key is or find out the private key knowing the public key. And that's like a huge foundational layer or underpinning concept of all of this. And why is that? Well, because the way it's generated is through an elliptic function. Now, we're not going to go into elliptic functions here. It's a very technical topic. It's kind of like digging into the nitty-gritty or how the SHA-256 works. It's not a hash function, it's an elliptic function, but that's how they're connected. So from a private key, elliptic function gives you the public key. And the reason for this additional protection that we're trying to create here, we're using the SHA-256 function, is because if at some point this is somehow reverse engineered, if there's like a flaw in the elliptic function that is uncovered or something else that eventually one day somehow somebody finds a way to go from public key to private key, if you are giving everybody your public key for all of your transactions, then very quickly somebody can get to your private key. But if you're protecting it with additional layer of protection, which is the SHA-256, with the hashing algorithm, then even if this happens, if somebody somehow reverse engineers this, then you will have that additional layer of protection because people will only have your address. They won't be able to get to the public key that quickly unless you've sent them money. But if they've been sending you money, they won't be able to get to it because there's this layer of protection, and therefore it'll take some time for the Bitcoin community to fix this problem, fix this bug, and replace the elliptic function, or fix how it's calculated. So fix this problem that there's a vulnerability here. So it'll take some time to fix that vulnerability, and you want to be protected as much as you can during the duration of that vulnerability. So there we go. That's the reason why we use addresses rather than public keys. That's why we apply an additional hash or additional SHA-256 to our public key to get the address. This is how it all works. And to finish off, let's have a look at what we need to do with the address for somebody to send money. So how does this actually happen, this part here? Well, let's duplicate this. This is our diagram. I've put in like sample dummy keys in there. And here's another diagram, so another person. So let's say that's me, Kirill, that's Adlan. And if Adlan wants to send me money, I have to give him my address, and he will put it into the transaction. So this message here is actually, that's how when we're actually transacting with each other rather than just encrypting messages, that's where the transaction actually goes. And then this transaction, once it's all encrypted like that, it will go to the blockchain. So it'll go into a block along with this public key that he has. So together they'll go into a block, and then anybody can, and the signature. So this transaction, the signature, and the public key will go into a block, and then anybody can go ahead and verify, or the nodes can verify that it is a valid transaction. So that's how it happens. Basically, I need to give him that address, and he will include it in the transaction. So there we go. That's how what the difference is between an address and a public key. And if you'd like to learn a bit more, where I learned about this stuff is a subreddit, or it's like an I don't use Reddit that much. It's like a response on Reddit to a question: what's the difference between the public and public address? Very, very detailed response by HK Support. Link, as always, will be in the notes for the course if you would like to have a look and find out a bit more detail on that. And on that note, hope you enjoyed today's tutorial. I look forward to seeing you next time. And until then, enjoy blockchains.